Have you ever felt like the world is crushing you? Like every challenge is designed specifically to break you down? What if I told you that those very moments of weakness, those times when you feel most vulnerable, are actually your greatest opportunities for transformation? Today, I'm going to reveal 10 powerful Stoic principles that will teach you how to convert every weakness, every setback, every moment of doubt into unstoppable inner power. These aren't just theories. These are battle-tested strategies used by ancient philosophers who faced far worse than we do today, yet they remained unshakable. By the end of this video, you'll have a completely new perspective on adversity, and you'll possess practical tools to turn your struggles into your greatest strengths. Are you ready to stop being a victim of circumstances and start being the architect of your own resilience? Then stay with me, because what you're about to learn could change everything. Before we begin, let me share a story that perfectly illustrates the transformative power we're about to explore. In ancient Rome, there lived a slave named Epictetus. He was born into bondage, suffered physical abuse that left him permanently disabled, and had absolutely no control over his external circumstances. By all accounts, his life should have been defined by misery and helplessness. Yet Epictetus didn't allow his circumstances to define him. Instead, he developed a philosophy so powerful that it not only freed his mind, but eventually influenced emperors, generals, and countless individuals throughout history. He understood something profound. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. That simple truth became the foundation of a life philosophy that transformed weakness into wisdom, suffering into strength, and limitation into liberation. Epictetus eventually gained his freedom and became one of the most respected philosophers of his time. Students traveled from across the empire to learn from a man who had nothing materially but possessed everything spiritually. His teachings remind us that our greatest power doesn't come from our circumstances, it comes from our response to them. Today, we'll explore 10 principles inspired by this Stoic wisdom, each one designed to help you transform whatever weaknesses you're facing into sources of unstoppable power. If you find value in this content, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any new videos. Now let's begin. Principle 1. Recognize what you can control. The first and perhaps most fundamental Stoic principle is the dichotomy of control. This concept is beautifully simple, yet profoundly challenging to implement. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. The Stoics teach us that our power lies not in controlling external events, but in mastering our internal responses. When you feel weak, when you feel overwhelmed, it's usually because you're spending energy trying to control things that are fundamentally beyond your reach. Think about it. You cannot control what other people think about you. You cannot control the economy, the weather, or whether you'll face obstacles today. You cannot control your past or guarantee your future. What you can control is your attitude, your effort, your integrity, and your response to whatever life throws at you. This distinction is not about resignation or passivity. It's about strategic focus. When you stop wasting energy on things outside your control, you suddenly have tremendous power to direct toward what you can actually influence. Consider someone who loses their job. They cannot control the company's decision or the economic conditions that led to it, but they can control their response. They can choose to see it as a catastrophic failure or as an opportunity for growth. They can choose to spend their days in bitterness or use their time to develop new skills. They can choose to isolate themselves or reach out to their network. The external circumstance is the same, but the internal response creates entirely different outcomes. This is where true power resides. Weakness often feels overwhelming because we're fighting battles we cannot win. We're trying to change other people, control outcomes or prevent uncertainties. The moment you identify what's actually within your control and focus exclusively on that, you transform from a victim of circumstances into an active agent of your own life. This doesn't mean you ignore problems or stop trying to influence your environment. It means you become strategic about where you invest your limited energy. Practice this principle starting today. When you feel anxious or powerless, pause and ask yourself, what part of this situation is actually within my control? Then direct all your attention and effort there. Let go of the rest. This simple practice will immediately reduce your stress and increase your effectiveness. The Stoics understood that peace and power come from accepting what we cannot change and courageously changing what we can. Principle 2. Reframe adversity as training. The ancient Stoics had a remarkable perspective on difficulties. They viewed every obstacle as training for the soul. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This isn't just poetic language. It's a practical philosophy for transforming weakness into strength. When you encounter resistance, challenge, or failure, your natural response might be frustration or defeat. But what if you could train yourself to see each difficulty as exactly what you need to grow stronger? Think of physical training. When you lift weights, you're literally tearing your muscle fibers. This damage is what triggers growth. Your body rebuilds those fibers stronger than before. Without resistance, there is no growth. The same principle applies to your character, your resilience, and your capabilities. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to build strength you didn't have before. The person who never faces adversity never develops the muscles of perseverance, creativity, and courage. Consider two people who both lose a significant relationship. One person sees it as a devastating blow, proof that they're unlovable, and spirals into depression. The other person, while acknowledging the pain, sees it as an opportunity to learn about themselves, to develop independence, and to clarify what they truly want in a partner. Both experienced the same external event, but they framed it differently. Years later, who do you think is stronger and more capable of building healthy relationships? The Stoic approach doesn't deny pain or pretend that difficulties are pleasant. Instead, it acknowledges that since difficulties are inevitable, we might as well extract value from them. This reframing is incredibly powerful because it shifts you from a passive sufferer to an active learner. You begin to ask, not, "Why is this happening to me?" but rather, "What is this teaching me? How can I use this to become stronger?" Start implementing this today. When you face a setback, immediately ask yourself, what skill is this situation training me to develop? If someone criticizes you unfairly, it's training in emotional regulation and not taking things personally. If a project fails, it's training in resilience and problem solving. If you face rejection, it's training in handling disappointment and persevering anyway. Every single difficulty becomes valuable when you view it as customized training for the specific strengths you need to develop. The obstacle truly becomes the way. Principle 3. Practice negative visualization. This Stoic technique might sound counterintuitive at first, but it's remarkably effective for building resilience and gratitude. Negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum, involves regularly imagining that things you value could be lost. The Stoics would contemplate losing their health, their relationships, their possessions, or even their lives. This wasn't an exercise in pessimism or anxiety. It was a strategic practice for building anti-fragility and appreciating what you have while you have it. Why is this powerful? Because most of our weakness comes from being psychologically unprepared for loss or change. We become comfortable, we take things for granted, and then when something shifts, we're devastated. Negative visualization builds a mental preparation that creates two profound benefits. First, it increases your gratitude and enjoyment of your current circumstances. When you regularly contemplate that your health could decline, you appreciate your body's current capabilities more deeply. When you imagine losing someone you love, you treat them with more kindness and presence today. Second, negative. Visualization reduces the shock and devastation when difficulties actually occur. It's not that the pain disappears, but you've already mentally rehearsed this scenario. You've already contemplated how you would respond, what inner resources you would draw upon, and how you would continue forward. This mental preparation is similar to how athletes visualize competition or soldiers train for various scenarios. When the event occurs, some part of you has already been there, which significantly reduces panic and increases effective response. Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, wrote, "It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing itself for difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favors on it, it is then the time for it to be strengthened against her rebuffs." He regularly practiced imagining exile, poverty, and death, not to make himself miserable, but to make himself resilient. As a result, when he actually faced exile and eventually forced suicide, he met those challenges with remarkable composure and dignity. You can begin this practice gently. Spend a few minutes each week contemplating what you would do if you lost your job, if a key relationship ended, or if you faced a health challenge. Don't dwell in anxiety. Approach it as a planning exercise. What inner strengths would you draw on? Who would you turn to for support? How would you adapt? This mental preparation doesn't invite disaster. It simply ensures you're not psychologically unprepared. If difficulties arise, paradoxically, this practice often leads to greater peace and happiness in the present because you recognize the precarious and temporary nature of all external things and therefore savor them more deeply. Principle 4. Embrace voluntary discomfort. The Stoics didn't just think about hardship, they actively practiced it. They would periodically engage in voluntary discomfort to strengthen their resilience and reduce their dependence on external comforts. Seneca would sleep on a hard surface and eat simple food periodically. Cato the Younger would walk through Rome in unusual clothing to practice being indifferent to others' opinions. These practices weren't about self-punishment, they were strategic training for maintaining inner strength regardless of external conditions. Modern life offers unprecedented comfort, and while that's wonderful in many ways, it can also make us fragile. When we're constantly comfortable, we become dependent on those comforts for our sense of well-being. Then, when circumstances force us into discomfort, as they inevitably do, we lack the resilience to handle it effectively. Voluntary discomfort builds that resilience proactively. It's the difference between someone who only trains in a climate-controlled gym and someone who trains in various weather conditions. When the competition happens outdoors in the rain, who will be better prepared? What might this look like in practice? It could be as simple as taking cold showers. To build tolerance for discomfort and train your mind to stay calm in unpleasant situations. It could be fasting periodically to reduce your dependency on constant food availability and to appreciate meals more deeply. It could be walking or biking instead of driving when possible, or setting your thermostat a bit cooler or warmer than perfect comfort to build tolerance for temperature variation. Beyond physical practices, voluntary discomfort can include social and psychological challenges. This might mean initiating a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, speaking up in a meeting when you usually stay quiet, or deliberately doing something small that scares you. Each time you voluntarily step into discomfort and discover that you can handle it, you expand your comfort zone and reduce the power that discomfort has over you. The key insight is that strength doesn't come from constantly being comfortable. It comes from regularly challenging yourself and discovering your capacity to handle difficulty. When you voluntarily practice discomfort on your own terms, you're far better prepared for the involuntary discomforts that life will inevitably present. You develop what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility, the quality of actually getting stronger from stresses and challenges rather than merely enduring them. Start small. Choose one form of voluntary discomfort this week and practice it. Notice how your sense of capability and resilience begins to grow. Principle 5. Focus on your character, not your reputation. One of the most common sources of weakness and anxiety is excessive concern about what others think of us. We modify our behavior, suppress our authentic selves, and make decisions based on maintaining a certain image. The Stoics drew a crucial distinction between character and reputation. Your character is who you actually are, your values, your integrity, your actions when no one is watching. Your reputation is what others believe about you, and it's ultimately beyond your complete control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." This is the trap we fall into. We allow other people's perceptions, which we cannot fully control and which are often based on incomplete information or misunderstanding, to determine our sense of worth and guide our decisions. This is a recipe for anxiety and weakness. When you focus on character rather than reputation, you shift to something entirely within your control. You can control whether you act with integrity. You can control whether you're honest, whether you keep your commitments, whether you treat others with respect. You cannot control whether others recognize these qualities or whether they judge you fairly. But here's the liberating truth. If your character is solid, your reputation will generally take care of itself over time. And in cases where it doesn't, where you're misunderstood or judged unfairly, you can remain at peace, knowing you acted rightly. Consider someone who makes an unpopular but ethical decision at work. They might face criticism, they might be temporarily seen as difficult or not a team player. Their reputation takes a hit. But if they made the decision based on strong character and ethical principles, they can maintain inner peace, regardless of others' opinions. Moreover, over time, as the situation unfolds and consequences become clear, their reputation often recovers and even strengthens. But even if it doesn't, they have the satisfaction of having acted according to their values. The practical application is this. Before making a decision, ask yourself not what will others think, but rather, is this the right thing to do? Does this align with my values? Will I be able to respect myself after making this choice? When you consistently choose character over reputation, you develop an internal strength that's unshakable. You're no longer at the mercy of others' opinions or the changing winds of social approval. You become genuinely free. This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback or become arrogant. Wise people seek honest input from trusted sources to identify blind spots and opportunities for growth. But there's a difference between thoughtfully considering feedback and anxiously trying to control others' perceptions. Focus on being a person of strong character and let your reputation follow as it will. This shift alone will eliminate enormous amounts of anxiety and restore a sense of personal power. Principle 6. Practice the view from above. The Stoics had a remarkable technique for maintaining perspective during difficult times. They called it the view from above, or cosmic perspective. When you're caught in the intensity of a problem, it feels all-consuming. Your anxiety, your anger, your disappointment, they fill your entire field of vision. The view from above is a mental practice of zooming out to see your situation from a much larger perspective. Marcus Aurelius would imagine himself looking down from above at the vast expanse of the earth, seeing millions of people living their lives, each dealing with their own struggles and joys. From that perspective, his individual problems, while still real, appeared in proper proportion. He wrote, "How small a part of the boundless and unfathomable time is assigned to every man, for it is very soon swallowed up in the eternal, and how small a part of the whole substance, and how small a part of the universal soul, and on what a small clod of the whole earth you creep." This isn't meant to make you feel insignificant or to suggest your problems don't matter. Rather, it's a tool for maintaining proportion and perspective. When you zoom out, you recognize that this moment, this problem, this emotion, no matter how intense, is temporary and is just one small part of a much larger existence. This perspective doesn't eliminate the problem, but it often eliminates the sense of overwhelming catastrophe that makes problems feel unmanageable. Try this practice when you're feeling overwhelmed. Close your eyes and imagine zooming out from your current location. See yourself in the room, then see the building, then the street, then the neighborhood, city, country, continent, planet, solar system, galaxy. From that perspective, notice how your problem appears. Then zoom back in, but bring that sense of proportion with you. Your challenge is still there, and it still deserves your attention and effort, but the existential panic often diminishes significantly. Another version of this practice is temporal zoom. Imagine yourself 5 years from now, looking back at this current situation. How significant will it seem then? What about 10 years from now? 20? This isn't about dismissing real problems. It's about recognizing that most things that feel catastrophic in the moment become manageable stories we tell about our growth when viewed from the future. This perspective allows you to respond to difficulties with more calm and strategic thinking rather than panic and desperation. The view from above is ultimately about remembering your place in the larger universe and the temporary nature of all things. Ironically, this cosmic perspective doesn't make you care less about your life. It often makes you appreciate it more deeply, precisely, because you recognize its brevity and preciousness. Practice this perspective regularly, and you'll find that you're far less rattled by life's inevitable ups and downs. Principle 7. Take responsibility for your responses. This principle is perhaps the most challenging and the most liberating. The Stoics taught radical responsibility for our internal state. Epictetus stated it clearly: men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This means that it's not events themselves that upset us. It's our interpretation and judgment of those events. This is incredibly empowering because while we often can't control events, we can always work on our interpretations and responses. When something happens that we perceive as negative, we have a moment, often very brief, where we can choose our response. Most people move so quickly from event to automatic emotional response that they don't even notice this moment of choice. They believe the event caused their emotional state directly. Someone cuts them off in traffic and they're instantly angry. They believe the other driver made them angry. But the Stoic perspective reveals a different truth. The event occurred, they judged it as disrespectful or dangerous, and that judgment created the anger. This distinction is crucial because if events directly cause your emotional state, you're powerless. You're simply at the mercy of whatever happens around you. But if your emotional state is caused by your interpretation and judgment of events, then you have power. You can work on those interpretations. You can question your automatic judgments. You can choose different perspectives. This is difficult work, but it's the path to genuine freedom and strength. Consider two people who both receive critical feedback on a project. One person immediately feels defensive, angry, and personally attacked. Their internal narrative might be, "This person doesn't respect me. They're trying to make me look bad. I'm not appreciated here." Their whole day is ruined. The second person receives the same feedback and, while initially uncomfortable, chooses a different interpretation. This feedback is an opportunity to improve. This person cared enough to point out problems rather than letting me continue with flaws. What can I learn from this? Same external event, radically different internal experience. The practice here is to start catching your automatic interpretations and judgments. When you notice yourself getting upset, pause and identify the story you're telling yourself about what happened. Then ask, is this the only possible interpretation? Is this interpretation serving me? What other perspectives might be equally valid? Often, you'll discover that you've added layers of meaning and narrative to a neutral event, and those additions are what's causing your distress. This doesn't mean you never feel emotions, or that you should suppress genuine feelings. It means you recognize that you have more control over your emotional experience than you might have realized. This awareness is the beginning of true emotional mastery. When you take full responsibility for your interpretations and responses, you reclaim enormous personal power. You're no longer a victim of circumstances, you're an active creator of your internal experience, regardless of external conditions. Principle 8. Practice memento mori. Memento mori, remember that you will die, was a central Stoic practice. In ancient Rome, victorious generals would have someone whisper memento mori during triumph parades to prevent them from becoming arrogant and losing perspective. The Stoics regularly contemplated their own mortality, not to become morbid or depressed, but to maintain clarity about what truly matters and to live with greater intention and appreciation. Death is the ultimate equalizer and the ultimate truth. No matter your wealth, status, or achievements, your time is limited. The Stoics believed that regularly acknowledging this fact, rather than denying or avoiding it, leads to a more meaningful and courageous life. When you truly internalize that your time is finite, many of the things you worry about suddenly seem less important, while the things you've been neglecting reveal themselves as crucial. Think about how people's priorities shift after a health scare or the loss of someone close. Suddenly, the argument with their partner seems petty. The fear of taking a career risk seems less significant than the regret of never trying. The grudge they've been holding feels pointless compared to the value of reconciliation. Memento mori creates this clarity proactively, without requiring a crisis to wake you up. It's a tool for living the life you actually want to live, rather than the distracted, anxious, autopilot existence many people default to. This practice also transforms fear and weakness. Many of our anxieties stem from an unconscious belief that we have unlimited time, or that we can avoid discomfort indefinitely. When you regularly acknowledge your mortality, you recognize that waiting for the perfect moment, avoiding difficult conversations, or putting off meaningful pursuits is actually the riskiest strategy of all. It creates a healthy urgency that motivates courageous action. Implement this practice thoughtfully. Each morning, you might take a moment to acknowledge that this day is not guaranteed, that this could be your last conversation with someone you love, that you have a limited number of days total, and today is one of them. How does this awareness change how you want to spend today? What becomes more important? What becomes less important? This isn't meant to create anxiety, but rather to create clarity and intention. The Stoics also use this practice to reduce fear of death itself. By contemplating mortality regularly, it loses some of its terror. Death becomes not an unthinkable catastrophe, but simply a natural part of existence, something every human who has ever lived has faced. This acceptance doesn't make you reckless or nihilistic. It makes you focused and present. You stop wasting your precious, limited time on things that don't align with your values, and you start investing it in what truly matters. Remember, you are dying, and that remembrance is paradoxically the key to truly living. Principle 9. Cultivate amor fati. Amor fati is a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. It represents one of the most advanced Stoic practices. not merely accepting what happens, but actively embracing it, even loving it. Nietzsche, who was heavily influenced by Stoicism, articulated this beautifully. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it. All idealism is mendacity in the face of what is necessary, but love it. This might seem extreme or even impossible. How can you love painful experiences, losses, failures? The Stoic answer is that resistance to reality, wishing things were different, and resenting what has already happened is a profound source of suffering that adds nothing productive. What happened has happened. You can either accept it and work with the reality you have, or you can resist it and suffer while still dealing with the same reality. Amor fati goes one step further, recognizing that everything that has happened to you, including the difficult things, has shaped you into who you are. If you removed any element, you would be a different person. Consider someone who experienced a devastating failure early in their career. At the time, it was crushing. But years later, they recognized that failure as the crucial turning point that led them to develop resilience, to question assumptions, to ultimately pursue a different path that proved far more fulfilling. If you asked them whether they wish that failure hadn't happened, they might struggle to answer, because without it, they wouldn't have the wisdom, strength, or current life they value so highly. Amor fati doesn't mean you don't work to improve your circumstances or that you passively accept injustice. It means you don't waste energy wishing the past were different or resenting the hand you've been dealt. You start from where you are, with what you have, and you move forward with full engagement. You recognize that your challenges are uniquely yours, and rising to meet them is your path to growth and meaning. Practice this by reframing your relationship with your personal history. Instead of carrying resentment or regret about past difficulties, can you find a way to be grateful for what they taught you? Instead of thinking, why did this happen to me? Can you shift to, this happened and now I will use it? When new difficulties arise, can you meet them not with resistance, but with curiosity? What is this here to teach me? How will this make me stronger? Amor fati is ultimately about profound acceptance and trust, not in the sense that everything happens for a reason in some cosmic plan, but that you have the capacity to extract meaning and growth from whatever happens. This perspective transforms you from a victim of fate into a partner with it. You're playing the hand you're dealt with skill and engagement rather than complaining about the cards. This shift alone is often enough to transform weakness into strength, because you're no longer divided against yourself, no longer fighting reality. You're fully aligned and moving forward, whatever the circumstances. Principle 10. Live according to your values. The final principle ties everything together. Live according to your clearly defined values. The Stoics believed that virtue, living according to wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline, was the only true good and the foundation of a meaningful life. External things like wealth, health, and reputation were preferred indifference, nice to have, but not essential for your well-being or worth. What matters is whether you're living in alignment with your principles. This is empowering because it shifts the definition of success from external measures to internal integrity. You cannot control whether you become wealthy or famous, whether others like you, or even whether your efforts succeed in their immediate aims. But you can control whether you act with integrity, whether you're honest, whether you treat others with fairness, whether you face challenges with courage. These things are entirely within your control, and the Stoics argue they're what actually determine whether you're living well. Many people feel weak because they're constantly judging themselves by standards that are partially or wholly outside their control. They feel like failures if their business doesn't succeed, if they don't achieve a certain status, or if others don't recognize their worth. But if your measure of Success is, did I act according to my values today? Did I do my best with what was within my control? Then you can end every day with a sense of accomplishment and integrity, regardless of external outcomes. The first step is getting clear on what your values actually are. If you haven't explicitly identified them, you're likely living by default values absorbed from society, family, or circumstance, which may or may not align with who you want to be. Take time to reflect. What do you stand for? What kind of person do you want to be? What principles do you want to guide your decisions? Write these down. Common values might include honesty, courage, compassion, growth, creativity, service, or excellence. Once you're clear on your values, use them as a filter for decisions. When facing a choice, ask, which option best aligns with my values? This makes decisions much clearer and reduces the anxiety of trying to please everyone or optimize for every possible outcome. You're simply asking whether a choice is consistent with who you've decided to be. Sometimes this means making unpopular choices or facing short-term costs. But the long-term result is a coherent sense of self and a deep internal strength that doesn't depend on external validation. The Stoics also emphasize living each day as if it reflected your entire character, because in a sense, it does. You are what you repeatedly do. If you compromise your values today because it seems expedient, you're training yourself to compromise them tomorrow. If you act with integrity today, even when it's difficult, you're building a character that can be trusted in any circumstance. This daily practice of value-aligned living is what creates genuine, unshakable strength. Living according to your values also provides clarity in difficult times. When you face hardship, you can ask, what would the best version of myself do in this situation? What response would reflect my values? This question alone can transform reactive weakness into purposeful strength. You're not just surviving difficulties, you're using them as opportunities to demonstrate and strengthen your character. This is the ultimate transformation of weakness into power, turning every challenge into a chance to live more fully according to who you've chosen to be. Conclusion: the practice of transformation. We've explored 10 Stoic principles for transforming weakness into unstoppable power. Let's briefly review them. First, recognize what you can. Control and focus your energy there. Second, reframe adversity as training that builds your strength. Third, practice negative visualization to build resilience and gratitude. Fourth, embrace voluntary discomfort to expand your capacity. Fifth, focus on your character rather than your reputation. Sixth, practice the view from above to maintain perspective. Seventh, take radical responsibility for your interpretations and responses. Eighth, practice memento mori to clarify what matters. Ninth, cultivate amor fati, love of fate, to fully embrace your life. And 10th, live according to your clearly defined values. These aren't just philosophical concepts to contemplate, they're practices to implement. The Stoics weren't armchair philosophers, they were practitioners who applied these principles in the midst of warfare, political turmoil, exile, and personal tragedy. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations while managing an empire and fighting on the frontiers. Epictetus taught while dealing with disability and the memory of enslavement. Seneca counseled emperors while navigating treacherous political waters. These principles work because they've been tested in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. The transformation from weakness to strength isn't instantaneous. It's a practice, a gradual building of capacity through repeated application of these principles. Each time you catch yourself trying to control what you can't and redirect to what you can, you get stronger. Each time you reframe a difficulty as training, you grow more resilient. Each time you choose character over reputation, you build unshakable integrity. This is how weakness transforms into power, not through a single moment of insight, but through daily practice and application. I want to emphasize that applying these principles doesn't mean you won't feel pain, fear, sadness, or anger. You're human, and these emotions are natural responses to life's difficulties. The Stoic path isn't about suppressing emotions, but about not being controlled by them. It's about creating a space between stimulus and response where you can choose how to proceed. It's about building such strong inner foundations that external storms, while still felt, don't topple you. The world needs people who practice these principles. We're surrounded by reactivity, victimhood, and fragility, people who crumble at the first sign of difficulty, who blame others for their circumstances, who are tossed about by every change in fortune or opinion. When you develop Stoic strength, you become a stabilizing force, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Your example shows others what's possible. Your resilience inspires their resilience. Your commitment to values in difficult times reminds others what integrity looks like. So I challenge you, choose one of these 10 principles and commit to practicing it intentionally for the next week. Maybe you'll start each morning with a moment of negative visualization and memento mori. Maybe you'll practice catching your automatic interpretations and choosing more empowering ones. Maybe you'll engage in a form of voluntary discomfort. Whatever you choose, practice it with intention and attention. Notice what changes. Remember the story of Epictetus we began with. He started with less than almost anyone, enslaved, abused, disabled, powerless in every external way. Yet he used these very circumstances to develop a philosophy and a strength that outlasted the Roman Empire itself. His teachings still guide people 2,000 years later. That's the power of these principles. Your current weaknesses, whatever they are, contain within them the seeds of your greatest strengths. Your job is to extract them through practice and application. You have far more power than you realize, not power over other people or external events, but power over yourself, your interpretations, your responses, your character, your choices. This is the only power that truly matters, and it's the only power that can never be taken from you. Every challenge you face is an invitation to exercise and strengthen this power. Every moment of weakness is an opportunity to practice these principles and discover your capacity for strength. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Stoic wisdom. If you found value in this content, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who might benefit from these principles. Leave a comment sharing which principle resonated most with you or how you plan to practice these teachings. Remember, you are more capable, more resilient, and more powerful than your current circumstances might suggest. The only question is whether you'll do the work to realize that power. Now go forth and practice. Transform your weaknesses into your greatest strengths.